All right, everybody. Hopefully, everything works well. Welcome. It's been a little less time this time from the last stream. So, hopefully, I can keep the trend. And I noticed there's a little bit of delay for some reason in the camera. I'm still using the crappy camera I had last week because I couldn't set up the phone properly. Um, so, I'm sorry if it's disturbing the fact that my voice is not 100% in sync. It's just what it is. So, hello, Jose, or I guess Jose Oliver from Nebraska. What's going on? Let's see if someone else pops up so I can start talking about uh, box rotations a little bit. So, I hope you guys had a nice weekend. I'm assuming it's still Sunday over there in a lot of places. I'm pretty sure it's still Sunday evening in the US. It's Monday morning here. So the week's already started, unfortunately, or fortunately. I do like working, so so it's pretty good. All right. I want to talk about, like, before we get started on the box rotations. I was eyeing the, what's it called? The Wacom Moving Pad Pro 14. I watched a few reviews this week, and it's not super new in the sense that I think it came out last month or something. Seems like a pretty good tool. I am very interested actually because it's almost time to replace not 16, the Cintiq 16 that I'm using now, and that seems like a good deal. It's not super expensive. It's not cheap, but it's not super expensive. And although I only draw when I am here, like at the desk in my office, I um, I would not hate being able to draw digitally somewhere else because I tried the iPad. I have an iPad. This is um this is the M2 Air or iPad Air M2, or was it M3? I forgot. Either or. And I have the somewhere probably. I have the Pro Pen. Yeah, I have the Pro Pen here. The new one. It's the newest one that came out. I hate it. I cannot draw on this thing. It's just not very conducive. So if I have to compare the two, where is it? Here. The stylus. This is an old Wacom Pro Pen 2. It's all kind of destroyed at this point. Uh, there is no comparison. Like, not just because it's thicker. Admittedly, the fact that it's thicker is better for me. I could just make this thicker even with just some tape. But the way this feels, some of the reviewers compared it to drawing with a crayon versus drawing with an actual pencil or the proper tools. It's like using a kid's giant paintbrush versus a proper brush for oil painting. Uh, you can probably even tell just with the sheer size of the tips. This thing, even if you get a thinner tip, it's just not good. I don't know. I don't like drawing on the iPad. It's also like too hard just drawing on glass. Technically speaking, this is glass too. The Cintiq is glass too, but the fact that the nib here, the tip has some give, so it kind of squishes a little bit, makes it different. The ideal for me would be something like the Supernote, uh, which is basically it's like a softer screen, so it's more similar to what it feels to draw on paper. It's an e-ink display, but it's e-ink, so it's just black and white. It's kind of like I don't know. I didn't try the Remarkable, um, but I'm assuming it's something similar to that. I don't know. I do like that feeling of pen pressure. on the Supernote. It's the best for me. I wish anything could replicate it, but I guess the Wacom gets very close in any case. So I'm used to it. I have tried. You might have seen the review before I took it down because it was bad, or the unboxing of the what was it? It's a Chinese brand. I can't remember what it was. It was. It's not the XP Pen. I have not tried XP Pen. Damn it. I cannot remember the brand. But either way, just the feeling of the pen, the fact that it was not as responsive and the screen was all kind of pixelated looking. I don't know. I just couldn't draw on it. So this is my favorite tool. And if I can just use it in a new manner, so on an actual tablet, that might be it. Anyway, let's get started with boxes. Let me move things around so I can hopefully see something. I cannot see the restream chat for some reason, so I'm gonna have to read it off of YouTube. So, why would you, to start with, why would you even bother doing box rotations? It's not just a flex. It's become a flex nowadays to show, oh, I'm doing box rotations. Look, I can rotate all these boxes. I can make these gigantic things like this, but more. This I was warming up before, so this is where it comes from. So I can do like all these times 4 in a giant diagram. Perfect. It's not obviously because of the flex. We do box rotations because when we draw something three-dimensionally, we need to be able to we need to be able to tell what sits on the same plane and what doesn't, and how eventually things articulate in space. If you think about it, this is just one example because a figure is a unit that's articulating in space. When you draw a figure, what you're really drawing, and it's especially obvious if you take the block mannequin here, what you're really drawing is a series of complex forms that have specific proportions and are articulating in space. So if you cannot first render that feeling of third dimension, which is really the basics, but you can also not draw those forms with the specific proportions in space, because anyone can draw a diagram. You can tell, right? If you draw it super flat, like, okay, I can tell the size here, right? Yeah, I can tell the size because it's seen from a kind of an orthographic view. But what happens when you move things off orthographic view? What happens if you want to take a leg? And let's use a cylinder. It doesn't matter because a cylinder, a prerequisite to draw a cylinder is to be able to draw a box. So if you draw this forward, or if you move this forward, suddenly you cannot really tell the proportion anymore. So how do you learn how to draw the proportion if not by learning what a one unit in space looks like? So box rotations are really cube rotations rather than just random box rotations, because they teach us not only how to, let's say, properly show that something is on the same plane, like could be the feet here, and obviously the more hard surface they look, and the more obvious the mistake's going to be. That's why I think it's very useful to draw box mannequins, because you can see the mistakes right away. By doing the box rotations, we can understand more or less how things should look like compared to each other, if they sit on the same plane, if something is longer than something else, even if it's a different rotation. I am not 100% accurate at this. So I mostly tend to eyeball given what my current experience is. There's no ceiling, like you can get it as good as you want. But in general, if you do this exercise, the box matrix exercise, you will learn to sort of gauge what these proportions should be. Because if you cannot describe the proportions properly in space, you cannot draw anything properly. So, like, This is one of the latest ones I've made for Last Arc, or one of the last ones, I would say, for Last Arc, no pun intended. Not perfect. I can see a lot of mistakes here, especially now, because I tend to make a lot of mistakes when I draw on a deadline, but or when I work on a deadline. But you can tell, hopefully, that the chest here, can I make it more obvious? So the chest is rotated compared to the hips. So even just in something like rotating the chest relative to the hips, you need to know some box rotations, because if you don't know how to describe the fact that they're different, you end up with something, I don't know if I actually don't have it here. Well, you would end up with something that's basically just, let's say, you would end up with something that's like this. Or even if this is a box. Very rough box. So you would end up with something like this. That's what most people do. That's what I was doing. Like, okay, I can stack them because I understand perspective, but I cannot. Hello, we're on cheese. Emperor of Cheese. Welcome back. How are you doing? It seems that YouTube shows the names of the emoji, the pog emoji, instead of showing the actual emoji. Anyway, so this is what you would end up with. Like, if you can draw boxes, like say you can draw a generic box of maybe roughly different proportions, you don't know exactly how much. I don't know what happened. It seems that it went on be right back on its own. I must have a keystroke associated to it. Sorry about that. So anyway, interruption aside. So if you don't really know a set of rotations, you're probably just going to do something like this and hope that it's going to look good and hope that it's going to look dynamic. It's probably not going to look dynamic though. I can always use an artist's perspective on perspective. Absolutely. I'm not an artist though, so what do you do? Let's say someone else's perspective on perspective. So this is not okay. It's not bad, but it's not very useful. And if you want to draw things that are standing on the ground, or if you want to rotate things around in the same place, say you want to add two, let's take something else for the sake of it, just real quick. Let's say you have a desk of some kind, given that hinges are hard. Let's say you have a desk of some sort, something like this. It's a 45. So, well, how do you draw a desk that's on the same plane now? How do you know that something like this is properly aligned? Given this is a little rough. You don't unless you learn to see these rotations. So that's what we're gonna talk about today. If you want to organize any scene, it's by no means 100% necessary, but it's going to shave off part of that wonkiness that you might still have left. Like here, I was not doing the box rotations left yet, not left. I was not doing box rotations yet. It's decent enough. I do see there are some issues though. I had just started doing some box rotations, let's say. So I could understand space, I could understand distance, I could understand the grid, but I could not really do rotations necessarily. So it's okay, it's not too bad. But if it gets any more complex than this, if it had got any more complex than this, things would have started falling apart. Thank you, Emperor of Cheese. So yeah, the title is just, it's very reductive, I would say. So anyway, before we can get into box rotations, I would say we have to understand how to rotate a plane. So let's start by rotating a plane. And this stuff is just what I was doing as a warm-up before. Very good warm-up, by the way. Like just connecting lines. So I always mention this, but connecting lines like that, it's useful, especially digitally in this case, because you see, I still miss it. There is a lot of processing that happens because of the software, like I said last time. So it's useful to just get into kind of the flow. And each brush is technically different because of how I set them up. But anyway, so what do we do? How do we start? How do we even know? So let's say I mentioned we use box rotations to understand what the proportions are of something or anything in space. But in order to be able to draw a cube, we need to be able to draw a square face. So how do we know that something is exactly square? Well, we memorize them. But let's say we didn't memorize them yet. The easiest thing you can do is really to take an actual cube. And I forgot once again to take it from upstairs. The easiest thing to do is take a cube, observe it, and try to draw it from different angles. In the absence of that, you can do something like this. Or not really. You don't need to do everything. And don't copy this one because this one is kind of slightly warped already because it's the vanishing points are very close. But something like this would be an easy way to start. Something like this even cube, it's a 35 down, 45 to the side. This is easy to draw. So let's start with something like that. How do you do that? To know that it's a cube. It's an easy cube. It's not in a matrix yet. So we can start with a Y. Start with Y. You all know that you got to start with Y, right? So you do something like this, and these angles should ideally all be the same. How do you know if they're the same? Well, you can duplicate this and rotate this around and see if they are sort of proper all around in any rotation. Roughly. It's not too bad. So it's roughly 120 degrees for all of these because it's 360 obviously in the whole circle. So then we have to start defining a square or a box. Let's start with a box because we can do it. A square is even easier than this, but let's say we want the box. So we go, like I said last time, you can go almost parallel and then kind of go in a little bit. And then I make sure both sides, both are basically the same. So same convergence, same angle between the two. Something like this. Now, when you try to make stuff that's symmetrical, if you're anything like me, you're probably going to run into trouble because you can't. But something like this, it's not perfect, really. It's a little off. So you might have to... You don't have to be this precise, obviously, but let's say, for the sake of this explanation. And then I'm going to have to move this a little bit because otherwise it's not in the center. So if you do something like this, let's say. So fairly... This is still small. We're going to have to make it bigger to do the rotations. Fairly parallel, but not quite. Not entirely parallel. So if you take this, you go here, you see it's going in a little bit. Hey, John. Welcome. It's going in a little bit. On this side, we have to do the same. So not parallel, slightly in towards the distance. And then how do you gauge the kind of the size here? Well, I eyeball it, quite honestly. So you might have something like that, but to double check it or triple check it, what you do, let me finish this up a little better. Let's say it's something like this. It's simply, oops, taking this and rotating it around and see if it fits. Same thing, because it's an equal. It's a box that's equal on all sides in this case. Not perfect. See, it's not perfect. It's a little wonky in this case. But let's say it's fine. It's good enough. Right? So the top is a square. By what I've done, hopefully you could deduct that, in fact, whenever we do something like this, so it's basically what I've talked about in that perspective video. Whenever you do something like this, so slightly converging lines at various degrees of convergence. Let's keep it more parallel, actually, to make it easier. That's symmetrical, more or less. Let's say this is roughly symmetrical. So you can double check like this. It's not. Let me try to make it a little more precise. It's difficult. It's not easy, even from a dexterity point of view. It's not that easy. Yes, it will be on YouTube. So just trying to be, you don't need to be this precise. It doesn't matter that much. But let's say you got something like this. If you want to be extra precise, you can just duplicate this basically and then flip it. And you see, it's not exact. It's not super perfect. You can do something like that. That's it. It looks a little warped though. Inherently, whenever you draw something, and you can see this in everyone's drawings. Like even if you check Yusuke Murata's drawings or Kim Jung-gi or Akira Toriyama, you will notice that there is a degree of wonkiness that comes from something like that is correct. That comes from the fact that we ourselves are not exactly symmetrical. So whenever you draw something, especially because you only draw it with one hand, there is going to be kind of a skewedness, a little bit of skewedness to it. So if you mirror the drawing, and that's why it's very useful to just mirror drawings every now and then, if you are doing it digitally, or take a mirror to check where it looks on the other side. There's going to be something that's going to be a little off because of how we see things. So something like this is fine. So whenever you draw basically a kite shape that is not, it's not a perfect diamond. It's like slightly shorter on the top side, let's say. Slightly shorter, not much. This one probably a little too close. I would ideally make this a little shorter. So something that's a little shorter on the top, because the lines have to converge. I didn't have to do that, but just making it a little more obvious. Let's say something like this. This is a square. This is always a square. Even if I had done it, let's say you draw a cross, and then you do something like this, and then you do this, it's warped, but it's still a square. So this is always technically a square. The more squished it is, and the more complicated it's going to be for you to rotate stuff. I'm not really sure how to explain this, but I feel like the way I learn is I want to some type of proof that this exercise works because I hear it everywhere. What do you mean by proof? Or also, what does it works look like to you? So what kind of proof do you need? So if you were more precise than I'm being now, basically, let's say, that is still a square. So this is always a square in perspective. Always. Now, the problem comes later when you have to actually make it a cube, because that's not as easy. You would have to maintain, like we saw here, maintain more or less the same depth. But as a starting point, you get something like this, which is a square. It's always a square. And the more parallel these are, without being exactly parallel, as long as they converge just a little bit, the easier it's going to be to draw pretty much anything on it. Let's say this is our world. So I'm going to make it like this. And because I'm going to have to use these, I'm also drawing it across. So this is basically why I don't recommend, I mentioned it last time, I don't recommend doing that exercise from Drawbox that's just how do you know that's a square? You don't know yet. So if you get something, if you do something like this, then yeah, this is a square. So you can do this and then try to draw, good luck, the ellipse digitally inside and see what you get. But we're not talking about ellipses yet. First, we're going to get the box. So what do we do with this? And how do we rotate this thing? How do we make sure that if we draw another thing in this place is properly rotated? Let's say I want to put something on top. I'm going to erase it soon, but let's say I draw something on top here. Oh, and the vertical, by the way, the vertical, let's keep it simple for now. Let's not worry too much about the fact that it's just going to converge a little bit. What is that? So let's say something like this. Let's say I'm drawing whatever here. While I draw this, because this is aligned with this box rotation, so it's a 45, I'm looking at this and I'm looking at this. If it's very close to this side, you just look here and make them pretty much parallel. As long as you don't do something like that, which is basically clashing with this one, you're fine. So this gotta go, the lines inside here need to go somewhere between, like to converge somewhere between these two extremes. So let's say I have this box here, right? How do I know that I can draw something on the same plane? And you will need to, even if you draw feet or whatever. You're drawing a classroom scene, very popular nowadays. You're drawing any kind of scene really that has objects that are not square to each other, because we can draw another square object here, another object that's roughly square, roughly something like this, making sure that this is going the right direction ish. The farther away you are and the more complicated it's going to be. So we can draw something like that. But how do we draw it rotated? Well, the way I talk about this in the video that you might have seen on perspective is, let's start by bisecting this. And it's not going to be perfect. I'm going to try to make it as correct as I possibly can. I'm probably going to have to do it a few times. Let's say you take something like this. Let me check if it is. So this needs to go converge a little, maybe less. So something like this and something like this. Okay. Roughly bisected. And the bisection here is going to go through the center. So we talked about this last time, the way you divide a square. It was also there at the beginning because we used a kite sort of shape to start with. But we draw the cross, and this is the exact center of the square. So if you take the square, base square, hopefully I can draw it as an actual square. So that's the center, right? If you draw a line from each corner to the opposite corner, from one corner to the opposite, this is the center of the square. So we draw the other. And if you have trouble doing this to start with, just take it from Blender. You take a box and you divide it. You do a subdivision, or you give it segments, like several, let's say at least 4 segments for each, 4 subdivisions for each face. You can skip this step at the beginning if you're not good at this. I was about to say if you suck at this, but if I suck, then I'm gonna get into what I said last time about if let's say if you cannot draw it properly, if you cannot draw the correct angles and divisions. So I'm just gonna double check it because I want it to be as precise as possible for this. Okay, something like this. Now, using these guidelines, if I connect these, I want to actually draw them because why not? What do I get? And I'm gonna have to move because I can't draw a straight line in the position where I am now. What is this? Chat. What is this? The black one. It's something you have seen before. So what is this? Let's see if someone knows what this is. Hopefully you can tell. I mean, this black one here in the middle, the new one. What does it represent? It is a rotation, but what does it represent? I feel like the teacher, the opposite side, because when I was at school, it's like a teacher asks something, don't ask me, please. It's okay if you get it wrong, but what do you think it is? Yeah, it is a square. It is a square, but what kind of square? What does it look like? Because these lines, this is flat. These are not converging. It is correct. They're not converging. So the bottom line, the horizontal lines here of this square are actually flat. They are flat. They are 100% flat. There is just one convergence to this. Just one. It ties back to what I said last time about different points perspectives existing in the same space, technically speaking. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is basically a 1-point perspective square. It's what it is. Because these lines are parallel. It's the same perspective, but it's what people call the 1-point perspective because you only have one. Am I on the same? Yeah. So these are going to, now it's probably going to go off screen, but these are going to converge somewhere far away in the distance. Let's see if they can, actually, let's get close enough. So somewhere here. So it's basically a 1-point perspective. Why? Because these, so-called 1-point perspective, because these are parallel. These two, they're parallel. So there is a point at which, for this 3-point perspective system, or 3 vanishing point system, when you rotate something, it just goes flat at some point. So the convergence becomes infinite. When one of the two convergences is exactly in the center of the figure, of the square. You cannot really get the 45 from a random square that you think is a square, like the other way around. Like you could say, the reason it's explained in something like draw box is like, oh, do something like this to draw it in 1-point perspective. You don't know if this is a square, but this way you do. So now you have a square. Now you can use these to draw ellipses inside or outside, which we might do later. But it's not finished because obviously you do not just want to rotate something 45 degrees. It's already better than before, mind you. So let's say I do have the same color. No. So now let's say I can draw, where can I do it? I can draw something that's, say something like this, a flat foot. And then I can draw it like this. Like following these lines, right? Following that as best as I can. It's not going to be perfect because I'm not a robot. So these are, let's say, the soles of 2 feet, square feet. They are rotated 45 degrees from each other. They are in the same plane. Whether or not they are, properly aligned, meaning proper distance, doesn't matter. Like whether or not the pose is natural doesn't really matter right now. But they are on the same plane. So they are sitting, if I make them 3-dimensional, by just trying to gauge the third axis for now, because we don't care that much right now. So still going to be wonky to some degree, but these are sitting on the same plane. If they obviously have the same convergence here. So that's why this is very useful to start with. Okay, so can we do this more? Or do we do this more? Well, we do, because right now it's like we drew, let's say, something like this plane and then this. But we need this and we need this. How do we get these two? We do the same thing. So we divide this more. At the halfway point between here and here, and the way you get it is, again, in this case I have it already because I made the drawing here. This is the center of this small square. This square here. This is the center. So I can do the same thing. And I actually have both here to make it a little easier. I can just connect the two lines roughly. This is where things can start looking a little wonky if you rely too much on being precise. Gauge with your eye instead of, oh, this must go through here and here. As you draw this, I probably mentioned it last time, because you have line thickness and because you're not a machine, you will introduce some small mistakes that will add up as you draw. So you always have to, or you have to keep you have to keep checking whether or not something looks correct, regardless of this needs to go through here, this needs to go through here, this is the middle point. You check this blue line against this and this to know more or less if it's correct. So we do it here, we do it here, and then we do it here. I know it's getting complicated. Usually when I start getting around this level of complexity, I start getting confused. When I get to this level, I start getting a little confused because when I see a lot of lines, for some reason, I get very confused. So if you do, don't panic. It's actually much simpler than this, technically speaking. Like you could simply, let me take maybe this. You could just remove all that and just keep the points if you want to make it a little less confusing. If you get good enough, you can just divide that in 4. Excuse me, in 4. Divide in 4, divide in 4, divide in 4, divide in 4. Everything needs to be divided in 4. So once you have it divided in 4, then you can connect lines from the new points. So if this is halfway, let's say they're numbered. So like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Going, well, clockwise, counterclockwise, doesn't really matter. But they always, on each side, they need to have the same order. So if I connect these together, and be very careful. If you do something like put the 1 here and the 3 here, you will get something wonky, because this is not going to be possible. So they have to start, if you start on the left, then you always have to start on the left. Pretend you are here, like, oh, these are my eyes, I'm looking here. And I'm looking here. There, I'm looking there. So you always have to imagine yourself on that side. Stop me at any time if something is not clear. So what we do here is basically connect these. And we got the rotation. Now notice, because I try to just be precise given what I have set up, it's possible that because of small mistakes, these are not converging properly. And I can check this. See, they are a little too parallel. So I'm going to have to redo it. And maybe that one too, actually. Let me redo that. You still want to make sure, regardless of what your points say, you still want to make sure these are converging on one side and the other. So these are converging in that direction, and these are converging in the other direction. Remember what we talked about last time. If they don't converge enough, you can modify them a little bit. You don't have to be extra precise. This is just to show more or less what happens. And then if you want to rotate another half, you can just do that. You can add half here between 1 and 2, and then you can rotate it like that. And that's how you get precise rotations, basically. That's how you get all these boxes out of one. Let's say it's this one. In general, that's how you get the other points of the rotation. So like these are still going to converge on the same line until the conversions become like infinite, because it's flat. It's the one point that we saw before. Where is it? This. The black one. Gray, dark gray. So all of these are going to be on the same line. All of these. So the red ones, they're going to be on the same line. Always. It's like it's a rotation in place. Any question? Or is there anything that's not clear? Hopefully it's clear what you should, let's say, learn to do this from what we talked about last time and in the beginning of the video. If you're not here at the beginning of the video, do let me know. I can go over it again. This is very, like, really the fundamentals of box rotations, because if you cannot rotate a plane, you cannot rotate a box. And again, following through, if you cannot rotate a box, you cannot, well, if you cannot draw a box that's one-to-one, you cannot draw the proportions, you cannot rotate the cube or the box, you cannot articulate anything in space, like an arm, you cannot draw that, or a tree branch, if it needs to have a specific length. Tree branches generally don't need to have a specific length, but an arm needs to have the specific length of an arm, otherwise it looks strange, especially if it's too short. So this is really something you might want to practice every now and then. You don't need to do this every single time, but does it work on different angles? Yes. So can you clarify what you mean by different angles? If you mean like here, like rotating on the vertical side, or any orientation? It's really important to always clarify the question, like, what do you mean exactly by different angles? Like, do you mean different flat angles? Like, can I draw, instead of doing the quarter rotation, can I do, say, something between quarter and half? Or from a different starting angle? So if the plane is not flat. Any rotation. Yeah, well, if you want to rotate, again, this is 1/4, but if you want to rotate it less, you can just divide here and here and here and here, and then connect those points if you need to rotate it like that for some reason. But usually these are enough to just show a difference. What you want to do, as I said last time, is show that there is enough difference between the boxes. Because I'm so confused on what exactly to study when it comes to boxes. Well, what do you need them for? Is the question. Let's say, what problem are you trying to address that your drawings currently have by drawing boxes? It's really important to know why you're doing something, because it might also be that you don't need that necessarily, or you don't need to draw all this. This is just basically a theory and explanation how these rotations work, but you can just copy that. Creating characters. Okay, so if you're creating characters, I'm assuming that you have looked at the characters and ideally compare them to your characters, and compare them to something that you ideally would like to draw, and you notice that the difference is your stuff does not look three-dimensional, something like that, or you cannot tell the space in between, which is the most common issue. It's what 99% of the drawings, or 99% in 99% of the cases, the problem is. So the most useful thing in any case that you can do, instead of doing, again, this is theory, this is to explain how it works, is doing something like this. Do you have all the boxes and their perspectives and angles memorized through enough practice necessary to memorize all the boxes or not? If you mean these boxes, the answer is pretty much yes. I have them memorized at this point. More or less, this one I actually added an arrow because I tend to screw this up. I have to redo it a few times usually. From this specific angle, this is the only one that I almost all the time kind of screw up, because I tend to draw this like this line. Is it necessary to memorize all the boxes? These are just 16. Or, well, 15 technically, you can just remove this. Or even less, because this and this are the same. So the ones you actually have to remember are, let's say, 3. Oops. Actually, not even, because this is the same as this. So let's say we have these, and we have this, and then this probably. 3, 4, 5, 6. Like technically speaking, the others are all the same. But if you wanted to learn to draw them from the actual angle, it's just these 16. Is it necessary? No, none of this is necessary. None of this is really necessary, but it helps. I drew this, I think it was before drawing all these box rotations. I do see some issues, but is it like, do you need? No. You don't need that necessarily. But if you consistently draw things that are very, very wonky or very flat, it doesn't hurt. Like if you want to do some hard surface, which I recommend doing in any case, of any kind, if you want to get rid of the wonkiness of the characters, then ideally you can memorize at least these. So that when you're drawing something, you can, like, you start drawing a character, or let's say even just a bust, kind of like what I've done. Where is it? Here. You can draw a few rotations, like chest rotations that are different from each other, instead of just drawing the same. Otherwise, what you end up doing is that you can't really draw anything apart from probably the 45 box, which is kind of like this. And you don't know exactly if this is the proper length. Do you need that 100%? No. You don't need any of this. You don't really, really, really need any of this. You might be lucky and just be able to wing it. But it helps. It helps. So what you might be wondering is it worth the effort? For me, it is. Because as I keep drawing, and I've been doing this professionally for what, 6, 7 years now? I keep noticing the same mistakes. And if I don't address them, they just bother me. I keep noticing, hey, I'm drawing a character. Let's say I start with a sketch of some kind. Just random. I don't have anything in my head, which is a problem. Ideally, you have something in your head when you start, right? You start with something. And that's something like this. So if I notice that when I start making this three-dimensional, and this is probably going to be very confusing to you because I'm very sketchy when I sketch. Is when I start making this three-dimensional, I notice that I cannot draw something in a specific angle because I want to draw it in that angle, but I can't. I just don't know what it looks like, or I don't know what the problem is exactly. Chances are I am missing some sort of, the leg would be here. I am missing some sort of fundamental. Like, why can I not understand this? What does this look like from this angle? And then maybe there is a chair of some kind here, let's say. How do I gauge what this chair should look like? This is also a little weird. I may exaggerate a little bit. Or whatever, like it's got armrests and whatnot. There's something here, maybe another box. Just simplify it. This is very confused, but this is how I sketched. You will just not know what to do at that point. Sharper edges things are more affected by perspective changes like Gundam. I'm not sure what you mean. Effort is never worth it. Is you put in a minimum of it. I guess it depends. It depends, really. That's something that is it's a trap that's very easy to fall into. Like, oh, this is too painful. I don't want to do it because it's not worth it. The human brain is exquisitely made for finding ways out of effort, because it's the brain is like a very efficient machine that tries to conserve energy. Welcome, Yuki. May I ask for a quick run through what you're doing right now and what you've done, please? Okay, so We were talking about how to get to a specific box rotation and what the box rotations are. Kind of like basically the theory behind these. Not just duplicating these, because I got, the video already out for these, and you basically can just memorize those, like from even just from the drawing of the matrix. I was just trying to explain how we get there and why we would do it. So first, why do we even bother with box rotations? And this is going to be a repetition for the people that were here since the beginning. Why do we even bother with box rotations? Because if we want to make something look like, ideally, in the first place, is part of the same plane, like feet, we need to be able to show that they actually are on the same surface. That's one reason. Then, in order to be able to draw something like a mannequin, we have to draw things, objects, three-dimensional objects, that have exactly, or they have specific proportions. How do we know that they have specific proportions in space? Unless we can draw a unit in space. We don't. So this is just to be able to gauge as best as possible, to guesstimate what something is going to look like from a specific angle. That's why we do box rotations. So you need a Y, otherwise you don't do it. I need a Y at least. Then we went into figuring out what's a square in perspective, because if you want to draw a box, you have to draw a cube. You have to draw 3. There would be 6, but 3 are hidden. Let's say a cube is made of 6 square faces. So you need to be able to draw a square first. How do you draw a square? Well, you start with something like a kite that's shorter on the top and symmetrical on left and right. So when something like a kite like this is not exactly symmetrical. It's kind of wonky. When you got something like this, it's always a square in perspective. The convergence of these sets of lines determines how skewed the system is, how warped the system is, basically. This is a square, and then from that square, how do I get everything else? How do I get any other rotation? Well, you start by dividing it in 2, and then they divide it in 2 again, and then you connect the relative subdivisions. Hopefully it's clear enough. I mean, if you start dividing 1, 2, 3, so you add 3 lines that divide it. So you do half, and then you do half again. You add 4 squares on each side, and you connect them, then you get a quarter rotation. You connect the number 2s, you get a half rotation, which is, in this case, was the 1-point perspective sort of square, because these 2 lines would be parallel. And so on and so forth. You can divide as many times as you want. But the point that I want to make is that beyond 4 subdivisions, it becomes difficult for you to tell. It doesn't really matter. You can see them because they're boxes, but if you're drawing an arm, does it really matter if it's rotated 45 degrees or 46? I don't think so. Like not in my opinion. So I generally tend to keep it at 4, not only because I learned it from Krenz, but because beyond this, like if I draw something that's in between these, usually I do because it's kind of random, but like how do I draw a line that's between these 2? It's difficult to do. It just starts getting wonky. These are fairly different from each other. But when I have to draw, just take the blue lines. Draw a line between these 2. Like, yeah, I can do it like that. But if they're far like that, maybe something like that? What's the point even at that point? No pun intended. So, going back to, is it necessary to memorize all the boxes? I think at least these is useful because they're different enough that allow you to show different things. So if you want to draw anything on here, let's say an arm, you can just take this and show that, say this comes towards us a lot, but that doesn't. So these are 2 very different segments. Right? So you can make a figure out of these if you want. You can make a figure out of these. By drawing inside these, you draw say this is just a cylinder, obviously, for the arm, but you can make it more complex. You can add a hand here. Somewhere, let's say. Ideally, you would not start with the boxes. You always start with the gesture, but this is not about the figures. So let's say you add a hand here, something like that. And then you start turning this into an arm a little better. You can just draw the actual arm shape or the leg shape in here in any of these axes, X, Y, or Z. So you can draw it like this, you can draw it like this, or you can draw it like this. And you can use any of these to construct a figure that has three-dimensional looking, feeling things. Given that hinges, which I'm not going into today, are more complex than just that. You can do hinges like this, but figuring out the third point is a little more complicated. And I don't have really a method for that. I just try to eyeball it. So you can really build a figure out of just these things. And in fact, I thought at some point, in order to brainstorm poses, I could just draw, so you draw a chest in here for all of these directions with the proper proportions, obviously, not random like I'm doing now. I would draw random chests, and I would have a giant cheat sheet and just put them together like Lego bricks, kind of, where the technique. It's just that I don't really like to do that. I find that as I do it, I get faster. I can just sketch. But technically, you could just take stuff out of here and compose it together to make something more complicated, like a figure. So anything beyond this, any rotation beyond this is probably pointless. So now, if you do this, you will notice one thing. The square, this is useful to get other points, other rotation. But if you pay close attention, you will notice that this, well, all of them, but let's say take this one. This is smaller than the original. So this way of rotating things does not preserve the size. If you want to preserve the size, you have to use an ellipse. So you would have to, now I can probably try to hand draw this ellipse, but it's gonna suck. Probably. So you would have to draw, technically speaking, you would have to draw a square outside here. Now you have the small one, if you want something that's the same size. Now that I have the small square there, I can just make it bigger. This is bigger than the original. So you can just, this is wonky, okay? I cannot hand draw ellipses like this, but maybe if I make it smaller, if I rotate it a little bit. Let's see. I'm going to try a couple times. If I can't do it, no, I'm just going to use an ellipse. Where was it? That's not even the center of the ellipse, so I'm going to have to adjust for that. Oops, I'm going to do it on the next layer. So the center of the ellipse would be a little, we can talk about ellipses maybe now. Actually, probably we should. So it would be something like this, right? So if you do something like this, then yeah, you can get the same size, roughly. Now I didn't do it super precise, but something like that. So now you would be able to draw it the proper size. Something like this. But it's still complicated to get the exact same proportions. At least for me, I'm not sure how to do it properly. I just try to gauge it. This is roughly the same though. It's just that to get the convergence, the easiest way to do it for me is dividing. So would you guys want to see first how to deal with ellipses, or rotate an actual box instead of just a plane? Because the box is just, I mean, it's pretty obvious. You just have to do the third axis, or even other rotations like vertical rotations. Because it's basically just just a repetition of this. Which one would you guys like to see first? We can do both probably if there's enough time. Nothing. Too complex. I think something is, I got something stuck in Twitch. Vertical ellipses. Okay, we got 1 and 1. Let's do the easy one first, and then we go into ellipses, I guess. Can we do box or maybe the both? So, okay, to do the box, we would have to do the box in the case to do the vertical ones. So let's do the vertical ones, and then we do ellipses. We do both. All right, so the box is very simple, really. It's just getting the rough convergence you have here and trying to do something similar on the other side. It's like, oh, well, really? It's that easy. But how do you know that something is exactly square? Now I have the same size. This is something I've been struggling with. Now, how do I know if I have this, I know that this is a square. How do I make another square face? That's a little more complicated. I'm not sure if there is an actual way to calculate that, quite frankly. What I do nowadays is try to gauge it. So you basically, from this point, since this is symmetrical, I know that everything is symmetrical. If I start with this, I just go straight down. Now, how would you calculate where this stops? Like mathematically or geometrically, exactly, I am not sure. Yeah, no problem, Yuki. So I would basically gauge it given my observation of the real world. So whether that's this or this, I don't know exactly how to calculate it. Technically speaking, there is a way to do so. So you will still have to use an ellipse though. So let's say, let me try to do it now, actually. I've done it a few times, but it was not perfect. So let's say our convergence is something vertical convergence, given that it can change, right? The amount of convergence the vertical lines have can change. Where was that? So I've done something like this before, right? At this point, where is it? This point can move up and closer here. But as this move up, these also move. It's like they move, this move like this, and these move closer like that. Or kind of, do they? It's kind of difficult to explain. Basically, it's like if this moves closer, this needs to be more square. I don't have it, I have not streamlined the explanation of this, so forgive me if this is a little bit confusing, because I just tend to eyeball those still. But the way you would go about it is like, okay, you have something that you know this segment is, well, you know the length of this segment. Technically speaking, to be able to get this point, you would have to be able to draw an ellipse over a square that's here. But the problem remains that you don't know exactly what a square is. So I go off of observation when I do something like this. That's why I say just learn the matrix. I don't know how to calculate it. I can just know that it's like that or not because I observe that it is like that at that point. So this one, the rotation on one plane, just the rotation on one plane, you can calculate. I know how to calculate it. The actual size there, I am honestly not sure yet, or I didn't work it out yet because I just go off of observation. So I probably something like this, I think. Because in order to be able to, actually tell that. There is a mathematical way. Ideally, you can understand the angle, the degree of the ellipse, or that an ellipse would have here, right? You would have to understand the degree of the ellipse there, and then you draw something like that. It's like, oh, it's here roughly. But I don't think it's reliable. The way I would say you should go about it is that you can simply use, if you want to draw a one-to-one thing, you can simply use what you have there or the information that you got from the matrix. That's what I would recommend personally. So to draw a cube here, to rotate a cube, then once you have this, let's say you have something like this, a cube. I know that this is roughly a cube because I've done a lot of them, basically. It's not a great answer, but you don't even need a lot of the things that you do in drawing are really coming through observation, and I would say that's good, because if you just try to calculate things, then they are going to mismatch because of what I said before. Why do they have to be so daunting? So many lines, right? That's why I could never draw a perspective formally. There were just too many lines for me. I would just get confused. I don't know. I guess I'm stupid. I'm not saying this in a derogatory sense. It's just that I get overwhelmed by the amount of visual clutter in any kind of endeavor. Visual clutter stresses me out. Whether that's a room that's very messy, or it's the visual clutter of lines, I just get upset. I feel confused. I don't know. I cannot figure them out. I'm not a fan of Where's Waldo. So say something like this. So for this one, we know, in any case, if we want to turn this into a box, the only things that we know are true are that, for example, this is symmetrical and these lines have to converge. Once again, I think the best way to go about it, okay, roughly, the best way to go about this would be to observe. I always think spatial to shape relationship always work the best for me. What do you mean? A lot of lines and chaos made it difficult for me. Like, I think, do you mean like observing what's there already and trying to make what you're drawing, what the new thing you're drawing relate to those? That would be basically the point. It's that you always observe what you have there. Once you have two lines set, you set up something with two lines, then you use those two lines to infer whatever else you're drawing. Pretty much. That would be what I do. So to turn that into a cube, you just have to draw a perfectly vertical. This is the 45, like the half rotation. You drop this down, and then you converge ever so slightly, because again, we're not converging too much here. Converge ever so slightly towards the bottom. And this is also why you should not converge too much here, the initial square, because if you converge it too much, then to match it becomes really difficult. Like, how do you know that these are not like so? Once again, observation. I observed with my eyes, I spy with my little eye, that a cube kind of feels and looks like something when I see it in real life, or a three-dimensional cube if you want to use a three-dimensional 3D software. You go off of what you can see. You cannot deny that. If you start going off of rules that deny what you see, you don't really get something that looks real. Basically being able to pick, let's say, a shape and measuring it visually based on another shape or space. It may not make much sense, but thinking Kim Jong-gi sort of, yes. It's just that in order to be able to measure it, you need to understand what it means in space. So if you see something like this, or let's say something really foreshortened. Kim Jong-gi makes the example of bikes, right? Made. Let's say something really foreshortened, something like this. How do you know what size this has if you want to draw something else. Well, you observe it enough in real life and you figure out what it is. Or you have done enough cubes that are one-to-one. You have to break down what one unit is and be able to compare them, given that you know that this is now one. For this kind of rotation, what I have internalized by doing the box exercise, because I couldn't draw much from life, because I get bored. I just get bored. I get bored drawing bicycles. I don't like to do that. I would rather do boxes than bicycles. So what I have realized is, through observation of actual boxes and drawing the box exercise, now I know that this kind of angle, so when I have this kind of relationship, right? And let's say I try to see a box wrapper around everything. This kind of angle relationship means, oh, I know that this kind of segment is one unit. Like this. This to this. This specific relationship is one-to-one. I memorized it at this point because I've done it enough times. Yeah, it's like you create a ruler in your mind because you know what one-to-one is. What, as far as I could understand from Kim Jong-gi's videos, and I watch a lot of them, a lot. As far as I can understand from his videos, he knew the size of the bike because he can see the bike in real life. He knows more or less the size of the bike. The wheel is square. It's rounded, but it's a square. It's one unit. And so he could infer that, oh, wait a second, this kind of looks like this. It looks very short, but it's really one. It's really one. So he understood that the specific angle means a specific relationship. Like this here. This is not perfect, obviously. His stuff is not 100% mathematically accurate, but it's close enough so that it looks like realistic, or it looks like it could be one. Given this is a warm-up, by the way, that I've done before, so it's kind of wonky. I like cardboard boxes. They make me happy. I wish I still had the sounds. I don't have the sounds, unfortunately. Otherwise, I would play the Metal Gear sound now. By the way, have you guys seen? I don't know if you've seen it. If you like Metal Gear at all, there is a guy who makes prank calls using game or show characters, and he made a prank call to a scam call center using Solid Snake's voice. That was really really good, and Otacon as well. Really cool. So that's for Metal Gear. So yeah, basically, the way you figure it out is by doing a lot. I wish there was a better explanation, better solution. I think that the reason why Kim Jong-gi was good at it is because he did it a lot when he was growing up as he was growing as an artist and he was growing as a person. So it was right the golden age, literally, where you basically learn everything at 10 times the speed as adults. He was just a teenager, and he just learned fast. He lucked out in this sense, like, oh, I figured this out, yay, good. Now everything else is gonna be smooth sailing. So I'm not saying that this is the end all be all. Like this is like, even if you do this properly, you will still have to figure out proportions, how they look in more complex stuff. It's not like because I can draw the matrix, I can draw anything else. It's a good solid foundation. It's not it's gonna solve everything. I have not played Delta either. I don't know if I want to play Delta. I don't know. I am conflicted. Metal Gear Solid 3 is my second favorite. My favorite is Metal Gear Solid 2, I think. I like both. But I don't know. I don't know about Delta. I don't know about remake. I don't feel very good about remakes. I don't like Final Fantasy VII Remake that much. I still prefer the original. I think a lot of people downplay his relentlessness to draw. His incredible incredible, but you follow the process, and a lot of what you're breaking down is, in essence, similar. Yeah, so he was just drawing all day. I mean, every day, all day for years. You're bound to get somewhere. Two diagonal lines drawn between opposite corners on the side reveals the side's midpoint. Two diagonal lines. Then do the same on the side that next to that one. Then you can relate where to draw the midline, horizontal and verticals. You mean bisecting a square or a plane like this? Like this. Yeah, this is the midpoint. That's the midpoint. And then you can use this to extend, we talked about it last time. I can draw a cube matrix. I don't know how to draw anything else. Well, that's because it's a necessary but not sufficient requirement. You know what? Look, this is not finished. I'm going to share it anyway. It's not finished, so don't take this as it's going to work. Aha, this is the end all be all. So, this is what I do in my free time. This is what I'm trying to figure out. Could be the strategy, the skill tree to draw stuff. These are just examples. They're not even all done. Dinosaurs, take dinosaurs as this is just an organic complex shape. So being able to draw a complex form in specific orientation. So this is ideally the skill tree that you would need to go through in order to be able to draw something. And if you go to the boxes, they're just like around here. Or here. Right? But it's pretty far from being able to draw that. So when you can do that, and this is by no means 100% necessary, it's just what I think is the underlying skill that you need. Then, okay, now can you multiply the boxes in space? Can you do free box rotations of two? Can you draw two differently rotated boxes that occupy the same space? Yeah, everyone needs a hobby, right? No, but this I do for the mentorship. Because there are people that are stuck, like very, very stuck. There were. And so how do we get to the next level? Unless you figure out what you're missing between point A and point C. If you don't figure out point B, then you're not going to get better. So you have to figure out more or less what you need. So in order to draw a proper figure, like a mannequin, ideally you can draw a mannequin, at least a mannequin. A mannequin is it's like 90% of a figure. You don't really need, especially if you don't draw muscular things. You don't really need much more than the mannequin. Once you get to the mannequin, you just need to be able to cut the form into like each simple form into smaller forms. So the matrix is down here, but then you have to draw, for example, boxes of specific proportions in space. If you cannot maintain the proportions in space, what I was saying at the beginning, if you cannot maintain the proportions in space, what do you do? When you have to draw an arm that needs to be, let's say, 3 cubes. I don't know, just making it up. I don't know if it's 3 cubes. Then you can cut it. But the wrapping box of a forearm, let's say it's 3 cubes-ish. So that's why it's not enough. Yeah, you can draw the matrix, but you cannot stop there. It's just one of the things that you need. It's not everything you need. So it helps. It's still not enough. Like if you want to draw anything else, you need to go out and draw that, basically. All right, see you later, cheese. I don't know, I might be here for another hour or so, depending on what we need to cover. We still have to cover ellipses in any case. So that's why you can draw the matrix, but not anything else. If all you do is draw boxes, you're not going to get better at drawing what you want. Because in order to get better at drawing what you want, you also have to draw what you want. I'm looking for books to help me with basic forms. Do you have some recommendation? I should make a book. I should write a book. that just basic forms for anything. There is a book that's called Sketching the Basics that is not too bad. But it really depends what kind of basic form you're struggling with. And I'm not sure that just books are going to help. What would help, which is basically what I'm trying to figure out for the fundamentals course part 3, is learning to break objects down into simpler shapes and then cutting those shapes so that you can get closer to what the object is. What kind of basic form do you have trouble with? Because if it's ellipses, a lot of people, pretty much, even I, have trouble with ellipses. Like ellipses, like cylinders, let's say. In terms of basic forms, like basic, it's just basically boxes, boxes and cylinders. Those are the two basics. Like you can take the cone if you want, but it's kind of like a cylinder that's pointy. It's tapered to a point. There isn't much else really, because anything else is basically a modification of that. Well, the sphere is just a circle. Then with ellipses inside. Be careful not to go down the rabbit hole of this stuff. I teach the stuff, so I go very in detail into it. But in terms of applicability, if that's even a word, in terms of being able to apply it to something, if you don't start with the end point, like I have this drawing and I cannot draw it, let me figure out how to draw it. If you start with, I want to draw a box, that's the goal, you are not necessarily getting where you want. So you might just get stuck drawing this and then you don't know how to use them because you did not start with a specific question. You have to start with a question about something that you're doing instead of starting with, I'm going to do this because everyone's doing boxes. And Nemo says you got to draw boxes. The mannequin is my goal right now. That's good. Good. But how much is really enough to learn forms to make a proper mannequin when you can draw the mannequin? As simple as that. When you can draw the mannequin, you have to keep testing. You have to keep testing and assessing. So let's say, I would say even if you can draw the matrix, you should be able to draw the mannequin. So if you try to draw a mannequin after drawing the matrix, what's the problem with the mannequin exactly? Because the mannequin is, for the mannequin you also needs, it needs the boxes, obviously the volumes, it needs the proportions of space, but it needs fundamentally the gesture as well. It's made of two things: structure and flow or gesture. Now you don't know what to do. Exactly right. That's the problem. And you have no idea how many times I've done this. So many times. I ended up getting stuck because, okay, why am I drawing this? Why is it getting so hot in here? I don't know. It's getting super hot today. Why am I even drawing these boxes at this point? Like, did I get what I wanted out of the boxes? I don't know if I have nothing to apply them to. So you have to always start with a goal in mind. And the way you get the goal is by trying to do something. So if you want to draw, let's say you want to draw, well, I wanted to draw a Digimon like this. Well, let's say I want to draw a fantasy character like this. I want to draw a fantasy bulky dude. There are mistakes here. I can see a lot of them now, especially. But when I look at this and then I look at something that's better than this because I like it more, why do I like it more? What's the problem with this one? I know that I screwed up the arm and I screwed up some of the angles here of the legs. I already know, and probably also the sword a little bit. So then I say, okay, now that when I look at this, I figure out what's wrong. Also, this part. There are so many mistakes that I see now that I didn't see when I was focused on doing it. Let's remove that so I don't get too embarrassed. When you figure out what the problem is in the thing that you're drawing, or if you get stuck, let's say you start drawing a character, you get stuck. Why do you get stuck? Well, I don't know what the pose should be. If you don't know what the pose should be, then you don't have to draw boxes. You have to try to understand poses a little better. Maybe copy a few poses or do them like the blind exercise like I recommend in the 10x video. You gotta have a reason why you're doing this. And the reason why I think people should be doing this is because they cannot maintain proportions in space as a starting point. Because then once I have this, I can say, okay, now I can just duplicate this and make 2 by 1. Is this proper? Maybe even too long. Something like so. When you can do a 2 by 1, then you can probably draw a figure in perspective, because you can draw a 3 by 1 and so on and so forth. Any recommendations for measuring, seeing proportions in a reference and copying it? When doing the boxes, my final boxes didn't look like the reference at all. You mean the reference is actual boxes, or the reference has specific proportions that you cannot get with your box simplification? I'm gonna have to talk about ellipses too, ideally. Because it's different. So it depends on the reference, obviously. If the reference is boxes versus the reference is not a box. Let me write it down. We can talk about ellipses first. So proportions from reference. Hopefully we can talk about it. In that case, we're on an hour. So let's talk about ellipses first. Let's go into ellipses and then we can go over how to get maybe proportions from a reference of some kind, because it's kind of relative to box rotations to a degree. So I already made a video about ellipses, well, about the cylinders. The simplest ellipse you can possibly draw is the ellipse that's horizontal like this, right? Roughly. It's always going to be difficult. For me, it's almost impossible to draw it digitally, especially if I have the stabilization turned on. Let's say I could actually, let's draw an ellipse. Cannot draw an ellipse digitally at all. I could do something like this, yeah, but let's say this is a wonky ellipse. So on paper, it's much easier, much easier, at least for me. I don't know about other people. So the simplest ellipse you can draw is the ellipse that's basically vertical straight down. So it's something you would be able to draw inside here. What you want to understand about the ellipse is that it's always, unless it's an actual ellipse in real life, it's always a circle inscribed in a square. I'm sorry if I'm not making the perfect circle here. So this always touches, the circle always touches here and here. However, because this point moves away from the actual center when you draw something like this, technically speaking, this line is closer to there than it is closer to here. So the center of the ellipse is offset. The ellipse is always an ellipse. It's not going to be wonky. It's always an ellipse. So you can flip this over, this half over, and it's going to match. And you can flip this over and it's going to match. This is the minor axis. This is the major axis. The thing is, when you draw it inside a box that's in perspective, it's going to be something like that. That's going to be the center of the box, and that's going to be the center of the ellipse. So that's where the complication comes from. Once you have the box, once you have the square, the only things you have to do, the only thing basically you have to do, there are two things you have to do. The first thing is to make sure that the minor axis of the ellipse is aligned with the vertical, the other perspective of the box. Always. Always. So this one is the easiest because it's just vertical. The center here is vertical. Always. The second thing that you have to do is that it needs to touch the midpoints of the square, because the circle does. Just these two things. So if I make it, well, I mean, I can make it big so you can touch like here and here and here and here, because it's gonna be the circle of the main red one. Let's say. Now, if you want to know how exactly you calculate all these nice curves, you don't. I don't. In fact, it's not even a very good ellipse. It should probably be a little more pointy. I am not the best at drawing ellipses, honestly. And I still struggle a lot. That's why I draw a lot of wheels to practice that. You're gonna need a ton of practice if you want to hand draw ellipses. So let's say it's something like this, not great. I can already tell. So if the center of the square is here, technically the center of the ellipse is here. So it's not really, so the major axis, so you can fold it over to make the sides match. It's moved a little bit compared to that, because the ellipse is always an ellipse. It's always, there is always a point where the ellipse is going to fold exactly in half. So what do you do when you have something that's not a vertical? Take any of the others. Let's take a square surface here. And again, I am using my knowledge of forms and that I have drawn before to try to figure out how big this needs to be to make sure it's a square-ish. Given that it's never going to be a perfect square. Something like that. Probably maybe a little taller. I'm trying to gauge what a square is here. Say it's something like this. So in order to draw an ellipse here, I am guesstimating more or less the half points here. They're probably not going to be perfect. Doesn't matter that much. I know that the other angle in this case is going, the other convergence, let's say the depth of this plane, the depth direction of this plane, if it's the face of a cube. I think it's still a little squashed. Let me make it a little taller. Something like this. It's still probably going to be off. So the depth is this, right? We know because this is a 45. It's easy. I just need to align it. I need to make sure I align it. So I start even moving my arm in that direction so it's kind of aligned like that, right? It can be, say, let's say I draw something like this. This is aligned. However, it's not touching all those. So this is aligned because if I bisect it like that, these two, I can flip over this line and it's going to match. So that's what I mean with aligned. The minor axis, fold over the minor axis, they close perfectly. More or less perfectly. As close as you can get them by freehanding them. Now I introduce the other variable. The second one is, let's match here. Let's match this. Better. Because now it's aligned, roughly, and it passes through those. Given, even if you have this, it might still be looking wonky. So how do you get them better? Like, this is okay-ish, not perfect. So if I wanted to make sure it's okay, I would just probably rotate it. It can still, to double check, it can still be somewhat wonky. I could show you a plethora of images that I have given around me of wheels where there's just one side of the ellipse that looks a little crooked and it throws off the whole thing. I don't think there is any way to get ellipses perfect freehand, you would have to use some kind of guide to get them exactly right. You can get close, but you will never do them perfectly by freehanding. You can get very close. You can just keep pushing and pulling. So this is all there is about ellipses. And then you draw a cylinder, you simply add the shaft in that direction, making sure it's aligned with this, and then something like that. And so now if you want, now that you have that, you can use that to rotate even. Right, I didn't talk about the rotation vertically. I got sidetracked. But it's exactly the same thing. So let's go back real quick to that. If I have the half rotation here, how do I draw the, like I have the half point, sorry. How do I do a 45 square here? Rotate it 45. Like that. It's the same. It's just like, literally, it's the same thing. See, if I rotate this, like now that I rotated this, I can see that this is off. I can clearly tell this is off. Would have been something like this, probably. So one thing you can do is to double check is just rotate the page. So something like that. And then you keep rotating. If you want to rotate anything here, let's say the green is not visible enough, probably. Purple. I'm gonna find something that's actually visible here. Okay, well maybe it is visible enough. So same thing. This is smaller. Again, it's smaller, obviously, because it's inside. So divide again. And then you should really use another layer. Hopefully it's visible enough. So this is the last one, right? It's something like that. To rotate around this angle here. But at that point, it becomes really trivial. Like when you have more than one rotation, you just do 3 rotations, and it doesn't really matter. If it's 45, it's like whatever, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters, as I mentioned last time, is that they have the same rough convergence. So all these boxes can exist in the same space. You just put them together. Instead of doing multiple rotations, which is painful, you just draw 2 of these as free rotations, like the chest and the pelvis are roughly free rotations. Roughly, because you cannot twist indefinitely, but roughly. So that's enough. That's really enough. And then if you want to use a cylinder here, you can use a cylinder. It's enough to do that. And then you draw the head. And that's another cylinder. I use cylinders for the head sometimes. And then you draw an arm that comes towards us, which is something like that. And then the other goes back like that with a cylinder. But the cylinder is really coming from the box. Like these are all boxes. Let's use a box. And I'm trying as much as I can by using the information that I have of these to not draw wonky boxes here. This probably long, but it's kind of like this one, right? I try to use as many of these boxes as I can when I draw a figure. Given that I should have, obviously I don't start a figure like this again, I should have the gesture first. Maybe use the intersection of diagonals to set the new midpoint of any four-sided face? What do you mean? It is, yeah, that's what I've done, basically. Like, if you mean this, I've done that without drawing them, basically. See, it's this, roughly. Like, I just eyeballed it. I don't do it all the time. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be so precise when you draw the actual thing. How do you deal with foreshortening of the 3D forms? What was the approach that helped you in that area? I always suffer connecting multiple 3D forms in space. Well, it depends on what you mean by connecting. What kind of connection is that? If it's hinges, we can probably talk about hinges next time, like just about hinges. Hinges are hard. But this is foreshortening. So the question could be, how do I know, now that I know that this is 1-to-1, how do I do the 1/2? Well, I would have done here with the blue one. Like, divide it, but, well, the half is always in half here. The midpoint is always in the middle because it's really where the horizon is. Okay, cool. Yeah, it was DPLJ. It was what I did. What I did was this. I just want people to get used to not using these guides too much, because you can make mistakes. Again, if you're relying on the guide and the guide is wrong because you made a mistake, it's absolutely human and normal to make a mistake. Then everything else will cascade to being extremely wrong. So better to use observation. Anyway, foreshortening is basically this. Like, how short should this be compared to this? How do you test out which areas to improve by trying to draw a complete piece? Yes. Or as complete as you want. If your goal now is drawing mannequins, you can absolutely just take that as a control point. Because you know it's reasonable to put that as a stepping stone, as a milestone. It's reasonable that that's the milestone. So you put that as a milestone, and you say, okay, if I can draw the mannequin, then I can continue to the next level. When I can draw the mannequin, then I'm going to try to draw a character. So then what between the mannequin and the character, what do I have to do? But I need to be able to draw the mannequin first, let's say. Everything goes back to perspective in order to get correct boxes. Yes. Perspective is the basics. Construction. Let's call it construction. And before that, observation. If you cannot see things, you cannot draw them, like I said last time. And that's why, if you take this almighty chart again, observation is the first node. Observation is the very base of this. Because you literally cannot do things if you cannot draw things if you cannot see them. And so the way that you observe stuff is, or to learn to observe stuff, is to replicate it. And replicate it as it is, even in 2D to start with. Because you need to be able to see the lines to start with. Like, as a very, very, very basic starting point, let's say. So everything really goes back to this. That's perspective. The convergence of the boxes. Again, foreshortening, not perspective. What you're doing, there is this problem with a lot of skill building, a lot of things for which you have to build a skill, that people are not thinking, especially for drawing and for visual arts, people are not thinking first principles. What is it that what does it mean to draw a foreshortened figure or a foreshortened arm? Just the arm. Let's forget the hand. No hand. Cut. No hand. What does it mean? Someone wants to, let's say, what do you guys think it means to draw an arm or a train in perspective, for a foreshortened arm? John, yes, basically. In a way, gesture can exist without. Take away figures. Gesture, like the flow between things, technically speaking, you can get the flow between things even on a two-dimensional picture. You can get that. So it's kind of separate. But if you want to apply it to figures, yeah, you need to understand how gesture works in space. It means that it's closer to us, but we're not getting to the point. Like, what is it that you're actually trying to convey? What does that actually mean as the actual thing? What is it that you're drawing? Are you really drawing an arm? If you're drawing an arm, what is it? I can only think of cool scene shots. Yeah, but what is it? Let's say if there is an arm. If I do this. Okay. My skinny arm. what is it? The guys are helpful to me combat with it. Okay. Like training wheels. You know, it's funny because there are some people who claim that learning to use a bicycle with training wheels is actually less effective than just trying to go without pedals. I don't know if that's true or not. I can tell you that my son refuses to use a bike, even if he had training wheels before. So this is an important question. And I think that's why a lot of people get stuck, because they don't think in first principles. They think, I'm drawing an airplane, I'm drawing an arm, I am drawing a car, as if you're actually drawing different things. But you're not drawing different things. What is it on a fundamental level? It's a tricky question. You could have read it in the chart. You have to see that not as the thing. I know we're getting kind of philosophical here. And this is going to be helpful also to answer who had asked the question before. I didn't write the name. How to get proportions from reference. Cubes insert 3D forms, yes, but can it be, what kind of 3D form is it? Let's say it's a blocky arm. Let's say it's a Minecraft blocky arm. Is it like a cube? Or what tells me that it is an arm? If it's blocky. The placement, okay. What if it's an arm in the void? How do I know it's an arm? Or what is an arm? It's a three-dimensional form, yes. But it's not just a three-dimensional form. Because a cube is a three-dimensional form. Come on. It's not that hard. I mean, it's hard, but it's not that hard. Keep guessing. It's a three-dimensional form. Let's say it's a boxy arm. But it's not any boxy arm. It's not any boxy form. Right? With context. Take it out of context. It can still... I get that if it's a boxy arm, it can get a little complicated. But take away the context. What is it without context? It's for manipulation before it's manipulated. So let's say I draw this. And then let's take the upper arm or the forearm. Not both. Which of these two looks more like it could represent a forearm or an upper arm? Which of these two, number 1 or number 2? Which one kind of feels like it could be a proto-sketchy version of a forearm or an upper arm, either way, because they have more or less the same proportions. I'm learning how to use all kinds of shapes, and controlling them sometimes build up another larger thing. Is it 1 or 2 that is more likely to become right? Why? What's the difference between these two? They're both boxes. They're both 3D forms. Proportions, right? They are an arm, a forearm, let's say. Let's say the simplification, the boxy simplification of a forearm is a three-dimensional form with specific proportions. That's all it is. That's what foreshortening is. You're representing something with specific proportions in space, enough specific rotation in space. That ideally is not the major one. We call it foreshortened because it gets really short. So instead of looking like this or like this, which would be like kind of the flat, side version, let's say, it's something like this. Actually, more on this. Kind of like that. Now, this is a little wonky. It's not perfect. Yeah, you're right. This is a little wonky now. So let me actually fix it a little bit. Okay, draw wonky. Something like this. That's foreshortening. That's drawing in general. Like what you're drawing, what a character really is when you draw it. And it's not a flat drawing style. It is a series of that's what I mean by thinking first principles. It's a series of complex, interconnected, three-dimensional forms, differently articulated in space, of specific proportions, because they look like a character, or because a nose needs to look like a nose in that specific style. An arm needs to look like an arm. The reason why number 2 looks more like it could be an arm, a forearm, than 1 is because it has more or less those proportions. That's what I mean by thinking first principles. You break it down. In order to understand what you have to do, you have to understand what actually you get wrong. I cannot draw a character. Why? Well, I cannot draw arms. Let me go and draw arms. And you can draw 1,000 arms and still get them wrong because you're missing the fundamental point. I cannot draw things of different proportions or specific proportions in 3D space. I am not 100% accurate with this myself. I am not. I still get them kind of wrong. But I know that I have to work on it. And that's why I draw like blocky mannequins and robots and whatnot. Because I know that I have to work on it. Because I know 100% that every time I try to draw something that's like this, and you see it. Like if you just try to sketch it without thinking too much, I kind of get it off. It's not easy. But the more you do this, the more you get used to this and doing the box rotations, you do the box rotation, then the next stage. Draw boxes of specific proportions, unit repeated in space, and the better you get at guessing it, engaging what they should be. That's what I said before. That's why Kim Jong-gi was very good at it. Because he understood early on, hey, this unit looks like this when it's foreshortened. Would you say organic or inorganic objects are harder to draw in terms of structure? Organic is a little more forgiving. So if I draw the blob, or a blob, say any blob, right? Yeah, is it exactly rotating in one direction? Like I don't know. I don't care that much. It kind of looks like that. So you can get away with a lot if you draw organic. So when you draw a figure, the more blocky you make it, the more unforgiving it is. Hard surface is more unforgiving because because proportions, that whatever you need to show, proportions and angles tend to be easy to tell. So if you can tell them easily, but you cannot draw them easily, then you will notice that and get upset. And anyone can see that more easily. So we draw boxes for the simple reason that it's just easier to see the mistake. It's not that it could be anything else. It's just stripping away everything else, basically. Should I practice doing robots and such? I think it's very useful to draw robots if you want to draw figures. You draw humanoid robots of roughly the same proportion, like the box mannequin, this. Because it forces you to draw properly. Now, technically speaking, you can probably get away with cylindrical arms like this because the wrist technically turns, so you don't need a special, like an exact hinge. But for legs, if you want to foreshorten a leg, like bending a leg, I still have trouble sometimes. It takes me a while to figure it out usually. It needs to be a specific hinge. So if I draw a robot like this, I have to spend some time figuring out the proper hinging. So it's just, you make the life harder for yourself just so that you can see the mistake more easily. It's frustrating, but it's useful. It works. I feel like I've been hitting a plateau in my art recently, basic anatomy, rendering, coloring, observation, and I don't know what to work on. What should I do to improve? I don't know. You know. Or you can know. I cannot know. How do you know without seeing that? I don't know if you were here before, but what I keep saying is that you have to look at what your ideal is and where you are. What's the difference? Ideally, you have something to compare it to, because if you have nothing to compare it to, then it could be just, it's good. Like, oh, I don't like it. Okay, why don't you like it? Same as usual. So the boxes help us noticing the mistakes on proportions we don't normally see. Exactly. I don't have permission to show you stuff from, I guess I didn't ask him, someone who is doing mentorship with me. He is drawing his own comic, and it's very good, especially the story. It's really good. You don't even need to be able to draw fantastically to be able to draw a comic book. It's a very, very good product. However, there is always, something that was a little bit off. It's like, why can I not get this, especially hard surface stuff? Like when to draw an armor, a piece, just a piece, like a robotic hand. Why does it always not look like I want? And he was getting frustrated. And so I was like, okay, let's strip everything away. Let's just try to draw boxes and proportional boxes. So what I've done here, like, let's draw a 2x1. Let's take another box here and draw something like this. And then see, this is wonky, by the way, a little wonky. Let's draw, and I'm gonna get to the proportions for stuff that you can see. Now, so let's say I got. Let me try to figure out what a box would be. A square would be something like that, probably. I'm just guesstimating again. Doesn't need to be necessarily perfect. I can adjust it later. Usually I just let things sit a little bit and see if something's up. Let's say this is a 2x1. I noticed that he could not draw this at all. So that was the mistake. He could not maintain the proportions in space. This is off, obviously. You just rotate it around and then see. When it stops being proper, when you rotate around, it means there is something to fix. So this face is a little off. A little bit, because it's basically a 45 and I screw it up. So you don't even have to get it right the first time. You can just slowly adjust it if you just as an exercise to be able to see it. When it comes, wait, let me rotate this back. I'm gonna drink something. When it comes to, is it rotated? What did I do? Oh my god. When it comes to forms, what's your opinion about the triangle pyramid? Is it used a lot? It's just a subset of the box. The box is what represents the space, the three-dimensional space. So if you want to get a pyramid, there's no real triangle. Now, given this is a little bit wonky, well, let's just use this. What a pyramid is just this. Let's take it roughly. This is a pyramid, right? What is it? It's a cut out of the box. It's a cut because you have removed, if you go straight here, you have removed basically something like this. No, not exactly, because this angle is different, but it's like you slice away one part. Would be a lot easier to do in 3D, but I would have to remember how to do it in Blender, and I don't. What you have done here is basically remove that. Actually, let me take plasticity because I'm used to plasticity. And then before closing, I'm going to go into the proportions from reference and how you would do that. I'm talking about a lot of stuff that's not necessarily box rotation, but it's somewhat related, so forgive me about that. So plasticity. So real quick, I still have the box from last week, it seems. Or maybe it's the one I made by myself. I don't know. So how do we get a pyramid out of this? Where's the enter key now? This here. So I'm gonna cut this. See what I'm about to do? You can probably tell what I'm about to do. I cut this. Wait a second. Yeah, there's a bug here. Hold on a second. I don't know if I can do it because there's a bug here. But technically speaking, this is what you would have to do. So cut. Let me see. Let me cut it. No. Okay. I'm gonna have to make it bigger. There is a bug in this software that sometimes it doesn't cut things if you're not. Okay. Okay. I've cut 2 pieces out of the box. Oh, look, it still looks like a box in this angle. What do I do? Same thing. Same problem. They should really fix this. So I have to scale it up a little bit so it cuts through. Enter and remove. Oh, look, it's starting to look like a pyramid. And this is just to prove the point, obviously. This is why you still need the box. The box is the king. Oops, not that. That's all. I don't want to do that. No, wait. Why? It's just selecting. Oh, it's because it's delete here. I'm used to using numbers to navigate. Anyway, that's a pyramid. Pyramid. I just cut the box. Without setting up the space of the box, I could not have gotten the pyramid. So that's the pyramid. In your opinion, is it a good practice to spend hours into trying to rotate a cube? No. I normally tend to get really angry if something is not looking right. It depends. Again, how precise is the stuff that you have to draw? Just spending hours and hours and hours and hours and hours drawing boxes is going to be diminishing returns. At the beginning, maybe a little. Like if you cannot draw them at all. Yeah, you probably need to spend some. I would say probably no more than an hour or 2 a day in any case. If you just cannot draw anything at all. But most of your time should be spent drawing the stuff that you want to draw, even if it sucks. I know it's easy to get angry if it doesn't look like you want. Oops. I get angry too. Well, not really angry. I just get sad. If I draw something and it sucks, like I said last time. Why does it suck? Like I said last time. So you'd probably still want to spend most of your time, at least half of the time, drawing what you want, even if it doesn't look that good. You have to try to dissociate yourself from it. It's a bit of a different topic, though. It's about not identifying yourself with the stuff that you make, which is really, really hard. Get disappointed. Yeah, disappointed, sad. Like, I should be able to do it, really. Why can I not do this? I've done this. I've drawn boxes for hours and I can still not draw this. Well, that means that it's not enough. It's not a matter of quantity. It's not, nowadays, and I was watching a video a few weeks ago. Was it a few weeks ago or a few days ago about this? Everyone says, work harder, work harder, work harder. Well, you can keep just drawing boxes, but if just getting boxes right does not get you where you want, it means that you probably need something else apart from drawing boxes. Just doing it a lot is not enough. If the goal is to be able to draw a box, then ideally you draw a lot of boxes. And at some point you will get it. But if you still don't get it and you've drawn a lot of boxes and you put in a lot of effort, then you probably need to sharpen your observational skills. If you draw a lot of boxes and you draw the boxes well and you draw the box mannequin well and you cannot draw the character well, then maybe you want to look into shape design. Just doing more volume will not necessarily give you the solution. It's about finding what exactly is wrong by observing it. You look at it, you compare it with something that works, that you like, and say, okay, this in mind, this works, this works, this works, this doesn't work. I'm going to try to work on this. It's not that easy, obviously. Sometimes you need someone else to point it out. That's what I do basically for a living. Like I teach people, I tell people what they cannot see by themselves and teach them how to see it, like for the mentorship. That's what I do. Because sometimes you just cannot see. I cannot myself. I would like to have a mentor, but it's very difficult to find. I had some. It's just very difficult to find someone who can point out something that's going to make a difference. Because you just don't know sometimes. And more than just having someone who tells you what's wrong, that's easy. Just, oh, that's wrong. You need someone who makes you understand why that is wrong. So you don't just need someone to tell you that's wrong. You need if you cannot do it by yourself, you need someone that tells you it's wrong because, and try to look at it in this way, in this other way. You need to understand basically by yourself why it's wrong. My brain starts to get fried when I try to rotate the boxes on higher and lower angles. So it takes a lot of time. Remember that the proportion part was the hardest thing in the box. You mean like, say, going up or down, like around here? You should just try to memorize them for now. Try to understand, especially the size of this box. Of this, this plane, the top plane. Try to understand the size of the top plane. If you just get stuck drawing boxes, draw something else for a while. It's okay. You don't have to get them all in one go. This takes a long time to internalize. So, before closing, there was a question, I forgot who it was, about proportions from reference. How do you get proportions from reference real quick? Because it's rotated, let's say, I'm going to take something that is what I use basically for my lessons when I do mentorships, and what I use as a basic form to understand stuff. Why isn't it control Ving? Okay. Do you guys, well, you can read it, unfortunately, but have you guys ever seen this in real life? If you're as old as I am, you have. I had one. It was not the original though. It was not the original, but I had one. Because I was broke, so it's not the Sony one. It was not the Sony Walkman. So how do you get the proportions of this thing? How do you understand the proportions of this? The quickest answer is, from a photo, you cannot. You cannot get the exact proportions of something because a photo is deceiving in many ways. You cannot know the exact proportions if this is the only angle from which you can see this. You can't. So what do you do then? If you only have one photo, you have to guess. Guess and kind of reverse engineer. So you think of the orthogonal planes, basically, of this object. If I can draw a straight line, I can draw a straight line today for some reason. So let's say the front of this object is like this. And the side of this object is like this. Now, you don't really need to draw the top from this, but let's say I draw the top as well. If there was something different in the top, you would have to draw a top, but in this case, it's just a block. So ideally, this size, you can probably make it the same as this size. So this is the same as this. I know it's like in PTSD geometry class. Where's this channel been all my life? I don't know. It's been here for about, I don't know, 2 years or something like that. Maybe 3. I'm finally learning something instead of scrolling hours of tutorials. That's good. That would be my hope for these streams. That's why I'm doing them. I know that a lot of people cannot afford doing more like paid stuff, like a personalized mentorship. So every now and then when I can, I'm just trying to put out some information because it's sad to see that nobody covers these things. Why? I don't know. It's so easy. Welcome back, Emperor Cheese. Yeah, I'm about to be done, I guess, for today. I'm hungry. Almost lunchtime. So the way you gauge proportions, and this is probably not correct, in fact, because it's got 2 colors there, I probably got confused. So I would say maybe something like this. Once again, just one photo is probably not enough. That's why studying photos is very difficult. It's better to study 3D models or stuff from real life. But you have to try to gauge. This is very simple. If you cannot draw something like this, don't try to draw figures and try to understand the proportions, like projections. Basically, these are projections on one plane. Like this is the front, this is the top, and this is the side. If you cannot draw this, it's useless that you try to do figures, because a figure would be the same. Like you take any pose and you have to try to splatter it. Kind of like you see, there is a video on my channel. It's not listed, but if you go to my website, you go to the mentorship session. There is a video that's like the example of a critique, and that's what I go over. It's just that the figure is way more complicated. So you've got to be able to do something like this before. You figure out what the proportions are in these planes from the photo, and then you reconstruct it. So for simplicity, what I do usually for this one is try to figure out in terms of, in terms of boxes, what is this? It's like 2x3-ish. Let's say it's a 2x3. And this is like 1, so it's a 3, sorry, 3 by 0.8. I don't know, what is this? 0.75? 0.7? Oh, I do a 7 like that. I don't know, you guys don't usually. I noticed that I'm the only one doing the 7 like this, because that's how we do it in Italy. Anyway, 0.7 and 2. And this is 3. And this is 3. Now I can use what I learned from the box rotations, and that's why I do the box rotations, to draw that. So you take any rotation you want. You start with any rotation. And I start the rotation like this usually, because I find it easier than just extending the boxes. I find it easier to just cut them. So I start with something like this and go, okay, what's my unit? Let's say, I don't like this. Something like this, probably. Now, what's my unit here? I'm probably going to get it wonky. I'm going to have to redo it, I think. Because in fact, honestly, I think these are wrong. So let me edit this. I don't do it right the first time, usually. I need a few attempts sometimes too. No, it was actually more correct before. So you have to try to basically remember what the boxes look like and a specific rotation, and say, okay, well, what's this like? Is it something like this? Probably. Like it's very foreshortened. Go back to what we were talking about. So my 1 unit is something like that, right? Roughly? Is this like 1 unit? Maybe it's something like this. Let's see. It kind of looks like a box to me. I probably need to rotate it around to see it better. But then I want it 2x3. So this is not super accurate. I'm just eyeballing it right now. So it's not really great. But you do something like this. Eyeballing. This is eyeballing, obviously. With a figure, you would get away with much more eyeballing than this. This is, again, unforgiving because it's for the sake of the exercise. So now this is like a flat version of this. It's like you put it flat on this side. And then you draw all the details and whatnot. Once you make sure that you rotate it around and it still looks like a box. A boxy box of 2x3. And it was, sorry, it was not even, I made it 1 here. It should be a little shorter than 1. So it was 0.7, so I gotta cut a little bit of it. Something like that. And now I got the rotation and the proportion. Roughly. From the photo. So I forgot who asked this before. But this is how you gauge proportions from a photo. You have to break it down into the most boxy-like forms that you possibly can. And given, see, I keep fixing this because it doesn't look like a box to me necessarily. So I'm trying to just make it a little better. As I rotate around, I notice things because I always do. I don't do it perfectly the first time. So that's how you would go around it, go about it. And then you can have a similar angle to that. Something like this, let's say. It's similar. It's not exactly the same. But you can see the same side, right? It's 2 units, roughly. And the way you then understand whether that's correct or not is like whether your assessment was correct or not is you try to draw from this angle. If without looking at the reference, if what you reconstructed kind of looks like that, then you guessed correctly. You can also try here, like you can try to gauge, if you don't want to do the whole thing, you can literally try to gauge what this is. Like given my knowledge of the box, I can draw on top of this. What's 1 unit here? It's more difficult because obviously you don't have as many points of reference here. You don't have the whole square. Then you can repeat. You're gonna have to use halves, squares, and whatnot. Like if it's something like, let's say, it's not really, but it's a 45-ish angle because this is a, normally when you show products, they're gonna be on this angle because you can see all the sides. So it's like a vanity shot. And so now that you know you have your box here, how many boxes it is. The more boxes it needs to be, and the more difficult it's going to be to gauge the actual proportion because you're going to introduce mistakes as you repeat the box. Okay, so something like this. And so this is a different unit though, compared to the one that we use here. It's a different unit. So keep that in mind. So you can do the same, you can do it like that. I just try to eyeball it in general. And for figures, it's probably better to just use something like this. This is easy. You can draw it, you draw on it. For the figure, it's not going to be that easy. And in any case, with just one photo, it's very, very hard. Almost impossible to do. So hopefully that clarified. Have you ever used 3D modeling as a reference to see how accurate you made your shapes and relationships to perspective? Yes. That's what I used to make the matrix that I shared, which is not here, but to double check these, I used Blender just in case. Not for all of them, but the ones I was unsure about. There was something that I skipped. Told me that someone told me if you're able to draw the head, ribcage, and pelvis like boxes, and they're connected, it means you can draw the human body from imagination. Do you think that's right? Well, no, because it's not enough. Like, you still need the arms. And you need to understand something like this. You can basically, yeah. So this would be the unit that you mentioned. But if you cannot draw the arms and the legs, it's still not a complete figure. In order to be, you might be able to get away without how can I put it? You can get away with it, like without knowing, let's say, projections in space and understanding space very well, if you just draw the trunk or if you just draw the head. However, in order to be able to draw arms properly, to be able to add another figure here, you need to understand a space, and usually with a grid. Because the grid, these are squares, so you can understand distances more easily with a grid. This is something I noticed early on a few years ago. Before I was doing all this box rotational stuff, I started adding a cross or a grid at the bottom of my figure drawings, and that would help me gauge space a little better because it gives me a point of reference. I know that if these are units, then whatever I draw is going to be compared to that unit. What to go back to what Cheese was saying before. You draw something and then you relate whatever else you draw to that. Everything needs to be related to what is in the drawing. One of the worst mistakes you can make when you, I keep saying this thing, when you copy something, or draw from reference, is referring to the reference but not to what you're drawing, because your drawing is inherently going to be different unless you're a Xerox machine. So you establish space, and then everything you draw from that point onwards, it's going to be related to that space, which means you have to observe the reference and be able to tell the orientation, the rotation that is in the reference, and translate it to your own drawing, given that it doesn't have to be 100% correct. It's an exercise, it's a futile exercise to just be able to copy that as it is. You can do it to improve your skills in observation and this kind of mental process, but you don't need to. Like your reference, I already made more than one video probably about references. It's just a reference, just some kind of idea that's there. Then if the arm is like this or like this, does not really matter. You actually have to change it usually, because if I have an arm like this, it's creating, say, a tangent with my head in the photo reference, I should not use it. So I have to change it in a way creatively that looks better, then avoids pitfalls and looks better in terms of shape design and whatnot, and also makes sense. A lot of stuff. That's why just drawing boxes is not enough. You have to consider all things. Anyway, hopefully I covered everything, because we covered ellipses, we covered some rotations. And intentionally, I did not go over just doing the matrix, because the matrix, there is a video about the matrix. That's how it's explained. I wanted you guys to understand why it's important and how it comes to be like this way. And so if you take any of these boxes, literally by just doing that, you can just draw those at various angles, right? Like so. Obviously, you're adjusting the size. I think that's all I wanted to cover for today. It's also lunchtime, so ideally I can go and eat something. If you guys have any last question about this, anything that maybe I forgot to cover because I am full, feel free to ask. So, and the school bell is tolling 12. It's noon. I am going to turn into a frog again, or a pumpkin. I'm not a Cinderella. So I don't become a princess. I just go back to being a frog. Or a fish, right? Nemo's a fish. Thanks to you for being here, Pony Loney, if that's how you pronounce it, hopefully. I don't know when I'm gonna stream next. I don't know. I might not be able to do it next week. I'll see. I've got a few things coming up. How about chicken? Chicken, maybe. I can be. When was the time perspective you felt perspective clicked for you? After I've done a bunch of Scott Robertson stuff, I noticed that with the blobs, basically, I noticed that I was able, like, if I drew, say, a flat form like this. Sorry, no, actually, it was more like if I drew something like a claws of something, let's say, in a very cartoony way, something like this, right? I would be able to feel space. If you know, like, where the Digimon word Greymon, it's got like these things that covered the claws, kind of like this, right? Like when I was drawing these arches, and then literally this is what I was doing all the time, like drawing something like this, like tunnels. Like, oh, this feels like it has space now. Like, oh, I actually have to feel like there is space in here. I have to, in some way, define X, Y, and Z. This is what made it click for me. That's why I made the first video about blobs, because it's basically what it is. So even if I had done the CGMA, I took dynamic sketching at CGMA in 2019. So I was just doing this. I could not understand why they would do the loops, because I could not feel the loops. And I started trying to feel that it was a surface because there was a space here. So implicitly, what I was doing in my brain was seeing that there was a plane here, like around these, and trying to draw something on top. I realized the sausage is always kind of creepy, but that's when it clicked for me. And I was still drawing wonky things. I think when I got this box rotation and why things should be like properly proportioned is when I actually started making them look decent. But if you want like the tipping point, I think is here. Literally, when I figured out, oh, there is a plane like this, right here. And if I draw stuff on top of the plane, they actually feel three-dimensional. So I actually have to establish that space before I can do any of this. If I don't perceive the space, it's going to be pointless. No pun intended. And I realize whatever I say, I could repeat this ad nauseum. I could say this all day. It's not really going to fundamentally change how you see things unless you experience it yourself. I can have some kind of mystical experience when I meditate, and I can describe it to you as much as I can. You will not understand it until you experience it. It's a limit. This is not something you can teach. I can teach you the technical aspect. I cannot teach you to feel the space. I can give you ideas on how you might be able to get there. But how you specifically get it, learning doesn't work with, oh, this is the right information, it's after that. That's why I was wary also of showing you that skill tree. It doesn't exactly work like that for everybody. Because the way you learn is by taking an information that you already have and associate it with something new. If you cannot associate something new to something you already know at a large degree, you will not learn the new thing. You need to be able to make an association. Oh, it's like this because of that I already know. You cannot just come up with ideas randomly. Do you believe that if you understand the proportions and form of an object, you can visualize it? I heard some people have problem with that area. It depends. If they have aphantasia, they cannot. I don't know because I don't have aphantasia. But I heard that some people simply cannot see things. I am very visual. I can see everything in my head. I guess I'm lucky with that. Maybe because I was copying a lot of stuff when I was a kid. Literally tracing even Pokemon on TV, on the old CRT TV. You cannot necessarily visualize it if you understand it. I think there is a lot of taking in that needs to take place. In order to be able to visualize it, you have to try to visualize it. And again, some people just cannot do it because they have aphantasia. So I cannot speak for those. I can speak for people who do not have aphantasia. And I think that the way you learn to visualize things better, given that I cannot do it every single time, the way I think you can get better at it is by trying to recall. So doing active recall. You look at something, you put it away and try to draw it. As simply as you possibly can. You take something very simple like boxes. So that exercise you talk about in the video, what's it called? The 10x your drawing skills, learning speed. That's how you learn to visualize stuff, by getting used to visualizing stuff. I also noticed that on my own, if I visualize something, I tend to just speed through it and get a better result without much effort if I visualize it clearly enough. Stuff that I don't visualize, that I kind of struggle, like, oh, should it be like this? Should it be like that? I am not really happy with. I don't enjoy the process, and I'm not really even proud of the final result, even if it looks kind of good. Because I didn't really have an idea in my head of what I wanted to make. If I get a clear idea of what I want to draw or make, it doesn't have to be a drawing. If I get a clear idea of what I think should exist and doesn't yet, and I can more or less guess what the steps are to get there, then the process of getting there is very enjoyable. But as to how you get better at visualizing it, I think the only way is by trying to visualize it. So you try to visualize something simple, but it doesn't just come like this. Like now if you tell me, visualize a wizard that casts magic, it can be anything. It's not necessarily going to be something that I will like. So it needs to come from within. And to do that, the way I do it, the way that works for me is by doing meditation. If you don't want to do meditation, you can do like, I think Salvador Dali was doing, like basically trying to get into that time frame or that kind of brain mode between awake and sleep when you're about to fall asleep and then you wake up, like kind of napping but not exactly. When your brain starts concocting weird stuff, that's when I get good ideas usually. When I kind of not really kind of daydreaming, but not exactly. It's not really daydreaming. It's gotta be something that matters to you in any case. If it doesn't matter, it's gonna be very difficult to visualize it. Hey, Tegur Nambala, we're about to wrap it up. Actually, I am gonna wrap it up because I have to eat. So, thanks everybody for being here, for having me here. Do let me know in the comments of the latest post, the one about this stream, if you want, if there is anything else that you want to know, any problem that you still have, we can go over it. I didn't really do Traceovers today, but we can do it maybe next time. Maybe something about this. Why don't you, actually, maybe I can leave you an assignment. Do the fundamentals matrix, see what's wrong, do some ellipses or cylinders, and we can talk about it next time, maybe next time I stream, so we can see what y'all are struggling with. So yeah, just do the matrix. But I've been drawing boxes all the time. Yeah, but don't just draw the boxes. Draw the boxes, and then try to see if you can figure out what's wrong exactly with them. Generic. Anyway, all right, I'm gonna wrap it up. Thanks everybody. Have a good night or day, whatever morning, whatever time it is for you at your place.